first thing, one of the most, I don't even want to say that, but the first thing that came up as an item was the loss of in-progress reflections. And this is actually something we've known about, but it's kind of difficult to fix because this is one of the issues that we have because we
Yeah.
chose to pilot via a website as opposed to an app. So
Yeah.
some people will lose their in-progress reflections before they save because of their web browser settings, or if they cleared history, or if restarted, or anything like that, or it crashes because we're not saving actually to the computer. We're just kind of saving temporarily to a temporary file. We
Yeah.
know that this is going to get fixed as soon as we go to an app version, but right now, without knowing the type of web browser that somebody's using, what their exact settings are, I don't have a workaround that can solve this for everybody. So
Okay, that's good. So fundamentally, until I've messaged people in the pilot groups that we're one step closer to seed funding. So once we get a first injection of capital, we can start fixing app-based solutions.
yeah, and that, I mean, the app-based solutions will go through and they'll fix a lot of this stuff because it'll have to. So the app-based will fix the loss of in progress. So because
Cool.
as soon as we have an app, we can save it to the phone, we can save it to the iPad, whatever, every time
Yeah.
somebody enters something. So
Yeah.
that'll go away after the pilot.
Cool.
I think the next two things are, explain what the scores mean. So from my side, from, the actual arithmetic work that goes into this, basically what's happening with the scores is we're taking people's feedback, we're taking an individual's, text, and we're
Yeah.
running it through an analyzer that basically looks at the words people are using. It looks at the combination of words, the order of words, all of that. And
Yeah.
then it goes through and it assigns a score. And the way that it does this is actually been studied. There's a lot of different research papers on this. And it's called a sentiment analysis. And
Yeah.
we create a score based on that. And it's not something that you and I came up with. This is documented research that does this. And so we create a score based on both the words, and we try and create one on the holistic meaning of
Yeah.
what you have said. And so from tech side, that's what those scores mean is we're analyzing the words that are used, we're assigning a numeric score, and the goal is to try and get you to have a data point that says, okay, if my scores are consistently low, what's the language that I'm using to describe my heart, body, mind, and soul? And if I want those to go up, it's not only what actions do I need to do, but how do I choose to describe what I'm doing? And so if you're
Yeah.
flatlined or if you're decreasing, even though your actions may be going up, what we want people to start being able to do is thinking about the language that they use. And again, getting back to that positivity being a labor of love, think about the word choice that you're using and the amount of words that you're using too, because one of the things that's known within psychology is the fewer words we use, the more likely we are to be in a depressed or a negative state or an apathetic state. The more words you use, you tend to be more excited. So if you
Yeah.
notice that your entries are sparse or just one or two words and your scores are flatlined, it's most likely because of that. So that's what the scores mean from my side. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about it, Angus, how do you think about
Yeah.
that?
I'd like to reinforce that from a coaching side because I've worked with hundreds of people over the years, and reflections are really important. And I think it's actually a very hard thing for people to achieve. A lot of people journal in high school, for example, but in real life, the very act of journaling is something that very high profile executives or very high profile athletes do, but many of us in the grind don't stop and take the time. So there's the action of stopping, right? Then there's the action of practicing thinking, practicing reflection about what have I achieved, which is some of the very basis of the SISU way, because it's about you helping yourself. And then the next challenge is being able to articulate those thoughts, right? And I've had that very struggle myself, right? And I'm just going to share, weirdly, at one point in my life, it was easy for me to communicate in French or Chinese because I kind of learned those languages without baggage, if you like, or without, social constraints. And that was very strange. So I learned to reflect in a foreign language before I could reflect. So I understand the complexity and difficulty of reflecting, but so it's very simple. Stop. Now think. Carl Jung, thinking is hard, right? There's a deeper message in there, but that's what it starts with. And then articulate. And to your point about verbiage, and even today, 21st century, I work with people. I say, well done. What did you achieve? And they immediately say, I got this wrong, right? I would put, I'd put a bet on that response. So articulate to specifics if you can. And in this program, I've been doing that myself the same way. Articulate to specifics, because I noticed my own data points fluctuating. And I think, well, I know I'm growing in certain areas, but now I've got to think about what am I telling the system so I can get a more accurate feedback from the system.
Mhm.
Or a more consistent. I'm going to close out with a very cheesy coaching mantra, right? Performance is consistency.
The next thing that it came back in the feedback was that the fasting and nutrition questions tend to conflict. And I think what's meant by this is that we ask, how long have you been fasting, and then how long, what is your eating? And I think I understand the perception of the
Actually, I
conflict.
had a very good, if it happened for me to
Yeah,
interrupt, I actually had a one-to-one with one of the users the other day about
amazing.
that. And it was, I think the nub of the message is fasting and feeding is either or. You don't have to fast, right? Fasting
Right.
is kind of a lifestyle choice, right? So they're there because you can do both. But recently I've done no fasting. So my fasting count is just 0 or didn't do it. Okay.
Mm.
Now, sometimes when I'm in a different state of mind, I build in fasting. So I'm going to stay on fasting. Very simple. Fasting, there's kind of no hard and fast rules. It's you decide to stop putting fuel into your system that you normally put into your system and change it up. Okay. Now, some people who want to be super zealous about it can like nil by mouth. I'm not a fan of nil by mouth. I'm not sure that's necessarily good for you, right? But they basically will starve themselves for as long as they can. I'm not sure that's good. Okay, we can look into that later. What I do, and I've learned and researched this through a couple of nutritionists and food coaches, is I call fasting is no food, but I do water, right? So water or sparkling water counts. There's got to be nothing in it pretty much. I also do black coffee. Black coffee is part of that's just psychological because it feels like I'm doing something other than water, because water can get really boring, or black tea or green tea, but no milk, no sugar, no additives. Just keep it pure. If you want a bit of bone broth, something a really light broth, that's not bad. A bit of miso soup even. Stuff like that counts as fasting. What you're trying to do is just, in very simple terms, turn our fat cells into a two-way street. So energy in, energy burn. That's what fasting is going to help you with. And then what we have right now is globally a lot of kind of glucose spiking in everybody because we have so much sugar. So we're not burning the energy. So our fat cells are kind of very loosely becoming a one-way street. So fasting helps turning our fat cells into a two-way street. And remember, fat accumulates everywhere. It's in our brain, it's on our organs. It's not just on our stomach or our butt. So you don't have to fast. If it's not, doesn't work for you, doesn't matter. If you do it, then try and track it. Okay. I've done up to 48 hours. In the last 17 of those were horrible. But I don't mind. I think 12 to 17 hours is actually quite easy. But that, again, start with you do you. Okay. And I really recommend, if you're reducing and you're not used to reducing fuel intake, then you do it on a graduated level. If you hit a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, something like that, set yourselves targets you can maintain. But it's not meant to conflict with food. And the food piece, just now, because there's a lot of confusion around food in the world, we've just done it at 3 groupings, right? And it helps you. It's just a basic, comes back to thinking. Am I predominantly vegetable based or carbohydrate based or protein based or processed based? Of the four, okay, I would, as a coach, I would say try to get your top three in in the fruit and veg, protein, carbohydrate. Try and do it in that order if you can, but you're not always going to do it in that order. As long as those three start to knock out the processed, you're going to start to grow. You're going to start making movement. But I do want to say it here, and comes back to the conversation I had with one of our users, the one-on-one. Sugar is going to be your biggest enemy. Sugar, your body will fight you. Your brain will fight you. Your body will tell your brain, and your brain will tell your soul that you need the sugar. You don't need as much sugar, and that's going to be your biggest challenge. So once you combine fasting and food constraints with the very reaction that your brain that's going to trigger, because our bodies and brains are saturated with sugar, that's going to be the real fight. So that's a very long-winded answer to it's not meant to be a conflict. You can choose one or the other or find a way to combine both. But if you get to combine both methodologies, you're going to force multiply on that area. But lead into it gradually. Was that answer your question? Or I know that was kind of a long thesis on fasting versus fuel.
I think it got to the heart of the comment. So, and again, this is one of those things we were really trying to balance the idea of we wanted to get information from people, but we did not want to make the forms so long and so in depth that people just got so tired of having to do the same thing, the same long form every single time that they didn't actually get to the meat of it. And so, we are trying to balance that. And one of the things that I think I would say as well is if you have recommendations on how we could better balance that, then, by all means, send that in the next, yeah, exactly. Send that in the next update, because that is something that we're always trying to figure out is how do we balance the desire for as many data points as possible? Because if it was up to us, we would be asking, 50, 60 questions every single time in order to get the right things and every little piece that we could. But we recognize that that's just not possible. And nobody's going to sit there and answer 50 questions and then do the reflections, because that's the important part is we want everybody to have the energy to do a thoughtful reflection. So how do we do something that's, go.
Let's move on to the next subject. But just to cap out what you said there, for the users right now, it's important to understand this is a coaching platform, so you're all doing a great job using it, but also coaching is about helping you improve, transition, move forward. It's not about creating dependency. And so that's the other nuance I want to emphasize is many people want the data or the AI or whatever they love in their tech to do everything for them. That's fundamentally how coaching does not work. So just there is a nuance there, because this is coaching. If it's stopping you and making you think and ask these questions, then that's a good thing too.
Yeah. So then the next thing is that there aren't any reminders and it's not an installable app. And these are two things that we are well aware of and are working toward being able to fix when we actually have this as an app. It'll become a lot easier to send updates and to send reminders to people once it is something that's downloaded. Right now, the only way that we can remind people is by reaching out via the WhatsApp groups and things. There's not a way to do this other than
but
that.
Also, so if you want more reminders, please tell me, because I'm actually the opposite to that. I don't like chasing or telling people because I feel it's intrusive. And I don't want to be intrusive. So if you're out there and you want reminders, please just say, can I have reminders? For now, I'll do them manually. I'll send you messages through the pilot groups or the pilot leaders. But if that's what you want, be careful what you wish for. But yeah, as a coach, I'm used to reminding people, right? So if you are that person who likes getting a reminder and it's not going to feel intrusive, because that's important to us as an organization. We're not trying not to be intrusive, and please tell us explicitly so we can start actioning that. Yeah.
So the next one I think is actually really interesting, and it kind of two of them tie together. So that you cannot split, resume, or backdate an entry, and that you can't review past reflections. So starting with the split, resume, or backdate, I think the reason that we have set it up, one of the reasons that you can't split it is simply because it's very difficult. As I said before,
Right.
gets back to the loss of in progress. It's difficult for us to be able to save, and there are some things that we can try and fix with that I can look into. But the other thing is when you sit down to do it all at once and you're forced to go through and think about those things as a holistic group, and I think this is, Angus, where you can really come in, is it changes the reflection. As opposed to if you only have to think about one of the pillars and then you stop and come back
Yeah.
and do
Yeah.
something else. And so having to do it all at once is actually a dedicated choice rather than saying, oh, you can piecemeal and do this, this one here, and then come back.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to say anything to that.
Yeah. 100%. It's having worked in a very high performing world on multiple continents. It's, to your point, the danger of procrastination is you get nothing out of it. You get nothing out of the procrastination. Okay, the point of the SISU Way partly is we grow heart, body, mind, soul. So our mental agility requires us to sometimes think in the moment. Strengthening mental agility or mental resilience requires us to think in a moment, make a decision in the moment, process that information, and get in tune with ourselves, back our internal wiring, trust ourselves. Back in the old days, it's called gut instinct. What's my gut tell me? So it's really important to tap into the here and now. So it's go, and whilst I'm used to doing this in an operating world, what I've done with the SISU Way is I have slowed it down a bit. What am I trying to say? So very simple. Prepare what you're going to say it in the reflection, shut it down. But I do acknowledge the point, and that's the challenge I'm having right now. Is sometimes I want to go back and see what I've written. So I'm watching the charts and I'm enjoying the charts, and the natural byproduct of that is, oh, why is that spike or a trough? I'd like to go and see my own reflections journal on what, because then I'm going back to memory. Now I could get deep into the yin and yang of remembering versus relying on the tech to tell you what you've remembered. But that's a deeper conversation for another time. But fundamentally, if just very quick sum up on that, if you think about going to the gym or you dance or you do yoga or whatever activity you do physically, weightlifting, whatever, you're stressing your body to create that kind of muscle growth, get those synapses firing so you can react and respond in a better way. It's exactly the same with your brain. It's exactly the same with your brain state. If you stress it, it gets better, right? And it might feel horrible or it might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's about kind of getting out your comfort zone. So another coaching thing we have, think of 3 circles. We have comfort, we have stretch, and we have fail. Okay. Comfort is easy. Stretch is growth. We need to take stretch to the point of fail, but fail tips into panic. We don't want to get into panic mode. So we want to stretch ourselves to the point of fail, whether it's emotionally, whether it's mentally, whether it's physically, or whether it's spiritually, which is a really esoteric challenge. And then before we get in that tipping point, we've got to come back. And if we need recovery, we go back to comfort, which is fine. Comfort's okay. We're not disparaging comfort, but we don't want to always be comfortable.
So I think the reviewing past reflections, that's definitely something that we could do. Um, uh, I mean, because the data is there, we can definitely do that. We'd have to look at the trade-offs, because one of the things that I was kind of thinking, and really this is just more for you and me, Angus, is um, once we have that numeric score assigned, does it make sense to keep, the actual entry there? Because then it's just data, then it's something that could eventually get leaked, whatever, if something was to happen. And so we could just keep the score. And that way, you can keep the trend lines, and maybe we only keep the last 4 weeks of actual entries. What do you think about that? I mean, it doesn't take any
So
amount of
I think
space. Like
I
it's
think
not
it's
any.
a I think it's a wonderful suggestion. And as long as we're from where I sit, as long as we're still protecting privacy as a basic mantra, and then why not do it? I've seen in business forever, people say, oh, we got to have an archive, we got to have notes, right? But the number of people who actually go back, I've done it in project management. Project management, you're supposed to close a project, do a review. Businesses leave their review to once a year or twice a year, right? Project management, stop the project, everyone disappears. Oh, we don't want to do a review, we're done, right? So using that as a mindset is, I think, let's do it. If people want it, I think it's important. And if we can do it and protect the privacy of the individual, 100% with it. And I kind of think, and this is, I'm kind of anti-bureaucracy generally, but if we can, if I can do it, and then there's an option just to, like if I'm using Claude AI, then I can just download, I say, give me a document, download it. So if they can just download those reflections in the moment and add it to their own private journal, that's another way of doing it. But if it's something we can keep for them and see if it works, then let's keep it. Let's do it.
Okay.
I'm all about it. And if it's not gonna, if it doesn't burn capacity and we can give people what they want in this case, then let's do it.
Okay. The request was a week end of session wrap up, and so we should talk about this because it's something we could absolutely do. We could basically institute just a little rule that said, okay, look at the last 7 days of history, or every Friday, whatever, every Friday, every Sunday, whatever, and show, here are your deltas for the week, something like that. So we absolutely could do that. I guess the things that from my side I'd be curious about is how much leeway do we give people? Do we say that they can set the end of week so that it's either Friday or Saturday or Sunday or even whatever?
So can we dig into this?
There we go.
Can we dig into the scope of that a bit?
Yeah,
do they want to do
That's
a wrap up with us, or do they want us to do a technical wrap up and just send them a message like we're doing now, or do they want a coaching session? What's the scope around that?
So the closing summary does not give the user anything to take away, and so a trend line summary was requested. So I think again that delta for the week.
So if the individual can push a button and say, I started on Monday and it's now Sunday or Saturday, whatever their weekend looks like, and they just say, show me this week's outcomes.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, that's what it is from, that's what it is from the notes.
Can we achieve that right now?
There's no reason we can't. We're already doing a delta analysis on the aggregate anyways to look from session to session whether somebody's going up or down. So there's no reason we can't. I need to just sit down and do it, test it, and make sure it works. But
so if we just tell the folks we'll have a look at how to do it.
Yeah.
For me, I would personally love it like a 7-day, 30-day, 60-day, whatever, 90-day aggregate. See how it's fluctuating. If there was a way to do that. Because I'm not a micromanager. I don't get in the weeds too much, but I like to see how it fluctuates over time and see if we're still going up, which is where we often find our gratitude and our happiness. If there is a way to do that, that'd be cool.
I'm thinking 7-day, 30-day, and for two reasons, not anything more than that. So one, you have anything more than that, and you have the big chart anyways. So after your 30 days, after you hit your 30 days, you've got the big chart, which is going to show that trend line. So I think the most recent 7, the most recent 30 is really kind of where you need to, those are the most actionable pieces. Okay, so that's easy enough.
And I think if you look at frequency, so I look at my dashboard and I've got however many sessions. So I know on a bad week I do 2 sessions, 2 reflections. even if I've done more training. But on a good week, I'm at 4 or 5. So there is a variable in there that we're kind of trying to account for, which is I don't really follow the session streak. I don't really care my session streak. If I've done 3 in a row, 4 in a row, for me that's low value information. It doesn't really mean anything. I like to know what the aggregate is. So if I can see I've got an all-time aggregate of 50 sessions, so I've invested 50 sessions, and over this window, and those 50 sessions show me X, that's I've got that aggregate. Whereas for you, you might have invested 33 sessions, and someone
Yeah.
else might have invested 60 sessions, and someone else might be at 22. So I think if the investment of number of sessions over time has yielded this output, now I can feel I would get excited by that for sure.
Yeah,
And I hope the users would get excited by that, because it comes back to the big picture.
I agree. The last thing actually then is the privacy handling is not fully explained. And so, I mean, we could take a couple minutes to talk about it now, but then also this is something that uh, we do need to put up a full page on, whether it's just a link within the app on one of the pages or on every single page. But essentially, as far as privacy goes, this is our privacy statement. We do not sell your data. We do not have any no one else besides Angus and I sees your data, and your data is fully encrypted. So when I log in or when Angus logs in, the only thing that we see is this alphanumeric user ID of 16 strings, and then it does show the score, it does show the reflections, but I have no way of seeing who that's associated with. Now, there is another table that's held in a different location, so that if the reflections database was ever to be compromised and that information was to leak again, it's just a user ID. It's not, doesn't have any of your information in there. There is another table that I can access. So if you were to lose access to your account and wanted to be able to rebuild it, I can do it, but the two are separated, and they're separated with the explicit purpose of, if one was to be compromised, it doesn't compromise the other. So from a security standpoint, from a privacy standpoint, that's how it's set up. And again, it's only Angus and myself that have access to this. And again, we do not sell your data. No one else sees this. This is purely pilot data that we're leveraging to see and to prove that the SISU Way has value, and it can show quantitative improvements in people's life and quality of life.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say, Angus?
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And I think it's important that we put a link, we write that down, put a link so they can see it.
Yeah.
Just for our users right now, I'm very big on that, ethically and morally. I'm very big. I've lived and worked in countries that were very autocratic, and how people and they just scalp your data. And then I'm living in a country now where I've seen it, where people just sell your data. They're using your data to enrich themselves financially. And I'm very passionate about not being that. Very passionate, because I think people are being fed a lot of misinformation these days about what's good for them and what isn't, based on those data sales. And that whilst we're using tech, I'm very mindful of the fact that we're using tech to help people. But that's a conflict I have, because I'm very anti-tech dependency. So, but the fundamental belief system, I don't want to go into it too deep, but I've got historical, professional, and personal reasons why it's important to protect people's privacy and walk that walk. And if anyone ever wants to reach out and have a deeper, philosophical, geopolitical discussion around that, I'd more than happy to have it. But I'll draw a line under it there, if that's okay.
Yeah. And just a real quick add on to that. This is one of the reasons that when you signed up, certain fields of the information that we asked for were not required. So yes, we asked for the year of your birth, but we didn't. It wasn't required to give us the date. We tried to keep it so that we got the bare minimum amount of information required, If you wanted to give more, you could. But we were very strategic from the start and going, what is the minimum amount that we need? We asked for that. If we choose to give more, great. But we wanted to fundamentally make this a situation where we didn't ever run into the situation of if something was to get compromised, that there would be excessive amounts of information that could tie you back. So this was
Yeah.
something that we thought about from the start.
Well, and that's actually, yeah. And let me, sorry, add to that because you make me think methodology. I've coached people into better spaces and places without needing to know their minutiae. You know, I've coached them through trend management, behavioral management, things like that. I know some people's personal stuff is their stuff. It's in their private space. That's where they want to keep it. And we have to respect that. And so that's kind of a coaching methodology is we're trying to transition out of my own experience into the platform. I can help you, but you don't have to expose your soul to me. That's not the need. And that's where we do differentiate with other people. And then just recently, one of our pilot groups shared something which is very vulnerable, but I was really happy to hear it because they've actually, as a group in that geography, gone through being financially scammed, right, through the tech, and people were just trying to basically scan them through cryptocurrency investments. So we're very aware of all that stuff going on inside, trying to find a way to work with that community. But we're up against building trust, and even if we're not the people who've broken the trust contract or the social contract. So we're very aware of things like social contracts, trust contracts, and all that kind of stuff.
The last question is really had to do with a clarification more so than an error. And it was, we had two people that were questioning, how do I answer the 1%? They felt like it couldn't get answered. So what did it
Yeah,
mean?
that's a tough one.
How do you quantify? How do you decide what to enter? And this is 100% you. I'm gonna let you take and run with this.
So coming back to the original thing about it's hard to do reflections because we have to have that behavioral change of stop, think, write, or stop, think, articulate. That's a challenge. The 1% thing is really hard, right? Fundamentally, if you don't know or you're not sure, just write, I don't know, right? I don't know is fine because you get your brain working for you, right? And the thing is, we've got to get our brains working for us, right? Oftentimes our brains are not working for us. So if you say, I don't know, and then tell your brain, I need to know, over time, your brain will start reconfiguring to tap into what's my 1%. But on a bigger picture is we've got like four pillars here: heart, body, mind, soul, right? And what we're trying to do is combat and sometimes sensations around I'm going nowhere in life, I'm just in a grind, I'm lonely, I'm struggling with a transition or whatever. And sometimes actually our growth is incrementally almost invisible to us because of the grind, because of environment or employment or whatever. We just got so much coming against us that we can't actually see how we're progressing. So this is kind of the cherry on the cake moment where you look at everything you've reflected on and you can see that. I'll give you my example. I was anti-AI. And then a couple of weeks ago, I thought, you know what, I've got to give this a chance. So I got a pro subscription with Claude AI, right? And just on the mental agility, the learning column, right? Every week I've grown just 1% in learning how to, I've probably grown more to be honest, but learning how to use AI and using AI to work for me, not me working for the machine, right? And then I'll give you another thing is relationships, reinvesting in relationships that I've got thought of gone cold is spending an hour with someone in a bit of dialogue and just discovering something new about them. Okay, that means I'm challenging my own assumptions. So these really tiny things are really big growth moments that compound over time. So we're looking for compounding effect. So we often do not think about that little bit of sweetness we've had in our life from an exchange or a learning moment or a physical achievement. So we ignore it, we brush it. We're actually, that's where the richness is. It's in those 1% moments, those tiny wee moments. And we use 1% because in real terms, it might not even be a 1% growth. Sometimes it's a fraction of 1%. But what we've got to understand is the compounding effect on our well-being. Okay, so if I grow in one area 1% over a 12-month period, I've had 50% growth, which is a really good return on investment. But it's more than 50% because when you compound it, 1% on this week goes into add 1% on 1%, that's 2% next week, right? Add another 1% on that, it's 3% the following week. So that's what we're looking at. The 1% is about compounded wellness, but you've got to really pan for that little bit of gold to find the riches in your life.
And I think just breaking it down even more simply than that is really what we're looking for from a technical input is basically if you take a look at the 4 pillars. So body, I spent an extra 5 minutes in the gym. I walked an extra 100 steps. Mind,
Yeah.
I read, I read this week. I haven't read a book in however long. I read this week. That's it. It's just literally trying to find that one thing that you can look back on and go, wow, I did just a little bit more this week, or I did something, I pushed myself. And that's really what we're trying to go and get people to recognize, both reflect on and then validate themselves that congratulations, you put in the effort. Like it may seem like a small thing.
Celebrate the
Exactly.
movement. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you've actually done a very interesting parallel because if you look at and coming right back to the thing about the language you just used versus the language I just used can tell us straight away differences or similarities between the pair of us. I instinctively go holistic and global. And my challenge in the 1% is exactly what you said. I have to train myself to hold on a minute. I put my time on my rower, right? I did 1 mile. This time I did 2 miles or 1.25 miles. That's more than 1%, but you can just extract that and just put that in your 1%, right? So, I've made the error of looking at the whole, all 4 pillars and looking for that global growth in all 4 pillars, which is not always sustainable or achievable. It's sometimes invisible. Whereas if you bring it back to, relationship engagements, or as you say, I normally walk 10,000 steps today. I did 10,100 today. That's it. That's a growth, right? We're just spending time respecting those growth moments.
Yes. And the last point on this is that any growth is something that you should be proud of and should be able to document. Because again, getting back to that 1%, you do 1% day after day after day for an entire year, and you're 67% up on the entire year just by adding one step. You go from 100 steps to 101 steps, 101 steps to 100, to that 1% over an entire year, 67%.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's yeah.
Yeah, so the math works on it, and whether or not you like maths or math, it works. It helps you, and that's why we want to help people compound those moments, because I've seen people go in some very dark spaces because they can't see this stuff, and have had some very sad moments where and this is one of the philosophical drivers behind this, where I've reflected on something I've encountered with someone who's been close to me and said, how was that their choice? There's so many other choices, right? And then on the lighter side of that, spiritually, I'm a little bit Taoist at heart, Kincaid. I love being in nature, right? If I see a hummingbird in my garden, it makes me happy. There's a gratitude moment. In that those things is there's whatever you believe in, there's thousands and thousands of years of human philosophy that in this we used the word earlier, so that's right, in the capitalist world we ignore sometimes to our cost, and we can earn money and have a good life. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum relationship.
Yeah, I think that's the important part is you can find a way to balance and do both.
Yeah, hundreds. All right, now I want to thank you, Kincaid, for doing this. This is really cool. because I've been in my head thinking this is going to go in my 1% this week, because I want to share this out to the community. I know it's nearly an hour, but I'm going to put it out raw. Are you happy for this to go out raw?
Yeah, we didn't swear. We
Yeah, I
kept it above
know.
the line.
There's another 1% for me. I didn't swear once.
So yeah, I think this is great. Yeah, go ahead and put it out there.
Cool. Love it, man. Thanks for this, and to everyone who's using, thank you, because you're contributing not just to the wellness state of this platform and this program, but hopefully to your own wellness state. And hat tip to all of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, amazing.